hope you enjoyed your drink of water. So I'm going to tell you a story. In July, while visiting family and friends in the Northeast, my husband Jim found himself once again tugged along on one of Deborah's grand adventures. We had stopped, with a little coaxing from me, at the Asian Import Emporium. Now, this is a place that literally has thousands and thousands of statues from all over Asia, Bali and India and China and Thailand and Japan. The owners live half the year in Bali, where they have renovated a temple that had gone into ruin. And they travel around Asia looking to support people by buying used things, but also supporting micro businesses who make statuaries. So now, on that day, I was shopping. Now, shoppers out there, I don't know if we have any shoppers here, but if you're a shopper, right? Bruce, you're a shopper. Oh, yeah. So Bruce, this isn't for you because you know this. But for those of you that aren't shoppers, let me explain a little bit of the subtlety about shopping that I was taught by my daughter. When she was about 6 years old, my daughter, Kristen, came to me with that passionate plea. Anybody who's an adult knows this plea, especially if you're a parent. Mom, I need to go shopping. Oh dear, I thought. I was very compassionate to my 6-year-old's plight. What is it that you need to get? Shaking her head, as only a little 6-year-old girl could do, she replied, Mom, it's not shopping if you know what you're getting.
Oh.
6 years old. All right then. So I was shopping. I didn't know what I was getting, but I did have that sense of I would know it when I found it. And sure enough, outside amongst the statuary from Bali, there she was, this beautiful Balinese statue that was holding a clay pot, and it looked to be a fountain. So the shopkeeper had told us that it was a reproduction, but it was a reproduction of a goddess that was often outside the Balinese temples, and it was a sign of fertility and prosperity. So it took us a few tools and a little bit of time to figure out if this old used thing could still be used as a fountain, but sure enough it could. So it took my husband and I no time to decide she was coming home to Georgia with us. Now, many of you may know that Jim and I moved to Georgia about a year ago, and we just recently purchased a home that, shall we say, needs a little TLC in the backyard. So I was excited when I saw this fountain because I started to get this vision of this place in our backyard where she would go. Now, I figured when we arrived home the next week, it should take us a few hours. It was just going to be a small little pond for her and plant some flowers all around her. Just a few hours, Bruce. Now, those of you who garden in Georgia are shaking your heads because you know what we did not know at the time. And you're probably thinking how cutely naive our little plan was. Bruce, I do see you smiling. So we arrived home about a week later after making the trip to the nursery where they were talking about conditioning. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I bought some things and we bought some plants and we headed home. So here we go. We got the shovel, Bruce. Oh, there must be a rock there. So I'm going to just move over an inch or two. I literally had my whole body weight standing on the shovel and it was going in like 2 inches. Bruce, what's up with the dirt?
You need a pickaxe.
Ah. So I look down and there's not dirt. There's clay. I kid you not, my first thought was, oh, the previous owners must have been potters or something and they dumped a bunch of clay outside here. No. So this is what the nursery staff meant by, you will need to condition the soil. So it became apparent quite quickly that our little couple-hour garden project was not going to be so quick and little. And the July heat in Georgia was not compassionate to our timeline either. So we had a choice to make at that point. We could just put the goddess in the forest. She wouldn't mind, right? We could just tell everybody she was a forest goddess. Or we could settle in and do what one of my favorite spiritual teachers, his favorite saying is, it takes the time it takes. And I knew in my gut that this statue needed to be in her rightful place, and her rightful place was surrounded by water. And so we decided to continue with a pickaxe and slowly. But I continued with one important shift. Instead of trying to dig the hole quickly and get the garden in, I decided to shift my focus and begin to visualize us actually creating not a garden, but a sacred temple. And with each shovel we turned over, as we carefully mixed that red clay with that rich black soil that we had bought, I started to imagine how that was enabling the water to move through the soil to get to the plants. And I was imagining how the water was going to recycle again and again as it flowed through the goddess and her clay pot. And my garden began to be more about water than just about the goddess and the sacredness of water. So as I worked and I sweated, I tried to focus on being part of some ancient tradition. I was visualizing myself building a temple thousands of years ago. Now, faith traditions across time have always known the sacredness of water. Water cleanses, it washes away impurities, it refreshes and renews. You may have heard of ablutions, right? They're familiar in many spiritual practices. They're that ritual washing of water for cleansing the body in preparation for prayer, for sacred activity. For Muslims, they call this wudu, and it's required for daily prayers and before meeting God. Ritual washing is in Judaism, it's called mikvah. In Sikhism, it's used to mix with something they call amrit, which is very important to the initiation into Sikhism. And for Hindus, water is so important and considered so sacred to submerge your whole body in a sacred body of water, such as the Ganges. These rituals are not just to remove physical impurities, but they really serve as this transitional ritual to take us from this everyday state of being to a more active awareness and presence. And the water allows this transition to happen. Now, some of you may have experienced one of a very sacred ritual called baptism. It's one of the most sacred rituals in the Christian community. Now, whether as a baby, as I experienced in my grandmother's Lutheran congregation, or whether as a teenager, as my husband did in his Baptist church, this water is such a vital part of this very sacred blessing and this sacred ritual. Bruce, were you baptized?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
were baptized?
A very long time ago.
A very long time ago. How'd that go for you?
Good. I hear I had a dress on. But
Okay, so it went very well then.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Well, for the Catholics, baptism is actually believed to remove the stain of original sin. Now, I recently heard a story from one of you, and I'm not going to out you because I didn't get your permission, but I recently heard a story from one of you that you were baptized twice, thanks to a Catholic grandmother who wanted to ensure your salvation, having not been convinced that the Protestant baptism that your parents gave you would do the deed. So you are double baptized. I hear that water is in the scriptures over 700 times. I say I hear, I read that fact. I did not count myself. You're welcome to fact check me on that if you would like. But one of the verses that I did read that I really loved is from John, because it says, "Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them." I love that visual of living waters flowing. When I read it, I really started to think of this Balinese goddess and how this living water would be flowing. Now, although many, not all, but many Unitarian Universalists do not regularly turn to biblical scripture, I'm going to bet that most of you know at least one Bible verse that talks about water. And I'm going to begin it, and we'll see if you guys know it, okay? Yell it out when you know it. It starts, do you know which one I'm thinking of already?
No.
Okay, it starts like this. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Many of us know that from Martin Luther King introduced us to that. It's actually from Amos, I believe. You know, both pagan and indigenous people's spiritual traditions are so connected to the earth that they always include acknowledgement of water in their rituals and in their ceremonies. Okay, so what about us? What about Unitarian Universalists? How do we honor the sacredness of water? Well, in many congregations, as here in Emerson, the congregational year begins with a water communion. Now, it's a ritual that brings water from many unique places. People are invited to take water from many unique places and pour it together as one body. Now, just to be clear, we don't do this to absolve you of your original sin, mainly because many of us, or most of us, don't believe that you have that. And we're not going to ask you to submerge yourself in our bowl here, mainly because I don't think you're going to fit, Bruce. We can try.
It would feel nice, though.
It would feel nice right now on this hot days, right? Let the waters roll down and make them cool. Okay, sorry, got sidetracked. And although I do hope that you at home at least maybe splash some water on your face, ablutions are not required for you to enter our congregations. So then what? What is it? Why do we do this ritual? What makes this ritual sacred to us? So I'm going to offer 2 words as my explanation. And the 2 words are these: remember and renew. Because I believe we do this ritual so that we remember that we did not come into this world, that we came out of it like a wave from the ocean. To remember that we have peace like a river in our soul. To remember that just like water takes many forms, we too as a community take many forms. To remember that like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean, we are on our own journeys that will propel us to join together as one strong body. As a non-creedal faith, we do not have a set of beliefs that all must ascribe to. But as a covenantal faith, that's very important. I want to emphasize that. Please feel free to continue this conversation until it's really clear the difference for you between creedal and covenantal. We are not a creedal faith. I'm not going to hold up a list of things you have to say you believe. But I am going to invite you into a covenant. And I think that this covenant of how we choose to be together, we need to renew that. We need to renew that on a regular basis. We need to renew our commitments to others we need to renew our commitment to ourselves, this covenant that we have with ourselves for continual spiritual unfoldment and meaning making. We need to renew our commitment with each other to share in the often hard work of community building. We need to renew our commitment to the world to be part of the creation of a just, sustainable, and compassionate society. So this is our communion. It's our coming together, and it's this time that we're invited to renew this very sacred covenant that we enter as part of this community. Now, before we share in our symbolic communion this year, I also want to talk about water itself and the planet, and our covenant to the water on our planet. Despite thousands of years of honoring the sacredness of water, we live now in a country where water is not held as sacred, at least from what I can see. So many in this country are disconnected from just a natural source of water and the life-giving force that it is. I think it's easy for us to become complacent or even really harmful when it comes to water. I actually wonder, even among us, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be with a natural body of water, to submerge yourself in a natural body of water? And those community swimming pools don't count, everybody, okay? When was the last time you sat by a waterfall or a pond or a stream or the ocean and allowed yourself to get quiet and listen to the wisdom of the water that would speak to you? For many in our country, it's so easy to mindlessly go to a tap, just get water whenever you want, or buy it in plastic bottles, to take long showers, to just simply wash away chemical-laden body or household products down the drain and simply assume that this source will somehow renew itself and it will be okay. American corporations especially seem to think that somehow the waterways and oceans are their dumping grounds, and somehow they're going to be magically cleaned, or that their sins will be hidden. In my own area where I lived for many years in western Massachusetts, we have a beautiful river that flows down to Connecticut. It's called the Housatonic. Indigenous peoples have used that land and been there and used the river for fishing and hunting for at least 6,000 years. In the 1600s, by the 1600s, it was mostly the Mohicans who were around that area, so the river became known as Housatonic, which means river of the mountain place. I'm very confident that they considered it a sacred, sacred river. Sadly, thanks to General Electric's 40 years of PCB dumping, it is no longer a magical safe place. You cannot swim there. You sure can't eat the fish there. And I do not think it is a pure source for any kind of ritual. Just imagine somebody coming into a church that has a baptismal, the place where they do the baptisms, and just dumping some sludge into that. It's outrageous to think that someone would do that and not be punished, and yet over and over these corporations commit that crime unpunished. I'll take you on a little historical sidetrack because I think there's a parallel here. Did you know that in the 1500s, indulgences were part of this nasty little practice of the Catholic Church? To raise money, the church would sell these indulgences to its flock. Now, indulgences were basically declarations that absolved you or a loved one. You could purchase them for a loved one as well. They absolved you or them from burning in hell, or even could get somebody that might have already passed and be burning in hell right now out of hell. You just had to pay some money and you were going to be absolved. Basically, they were get out of hell free cards. But they were not free. And there was a young man, now you may have heard of this guy, Martin Luther. He was so angered by this practice that he actually nailed 95 statements of opposition onto the church door. And well, basically, he started a revolution with a little help from the printing press, which happened to be going at the time, just getting going at the time. Well, unfortunately, our rivers and streams and lakes and oceans, unfortunately for them, I think corporations have been receiving modern-day indulgences from our government, absolving them over and over again from their sins while the rest of us live in the hell that they create with our waters. And this suffering is being experienced disproportionately by poor communities and communities of color. Residents of Flint, Michigan, and other places around our country tell the tale, and I think it's important that we don't forget it and we don't think that it's all okay there, because it's not. So if you're not familiar with the story of Flint, the Flint River served for decades as a dumping ground for many businesses. And so residents there received their drinking water supply from nearby Detroit. But in 2014, in an effort to save money, the water source was switched, and officials actually began pumping water from the Flint River to serve as water for all of those families. And although the water had become highly corrosive, the state did not treat it, and so it caused lead to leach out from aging pipes into thousands and thousands of homes, resulting in death, illness, and devastating consequences for the entire community. Despite residents lugging jugs of yellow, disgusting water, officials would ensure them that somehow this water was safe to drink. Nearly 9,000 children were given lead-contaminated water for over 18 months. The work there is not done, nor is it in many other communities, especially poor communities and communities of color that are often the brunt for this water abuse and do not have the resources to fight back. Beginning in 2017, Newark, New Jersey was another city that has a high population of people of color, and it began facing its own fight against local officials to get the lead out of the water. And this story goes on and on across our country. So what are we to do? Well, first we need to get involved, right? We need to become modern-day Martin Luthers and nail our opposition to every single corporation's door. And I mean that literally. Like, let's just write it all down and just start plastering it on the doors so that it's not forgotten. We need to really start this water revolution and demand water equity for everyone in this country. And this morning I'm going to say that we need to do something else that we can start right here, right now. We need to reclaim our connection to water, to remind ourselves that it is sacred every single day. We must recognize how water binds us, how it profoundly shows our interconnectedness. Eventually, we all return to the oneness, just as all rivers return to the ocean. And they return with either their purity or their contamination. We each are part of each other. So when we join in community, we acknowledge this great truth. I love this poem by Rumi. Rumi says, "Listen, O drop, give yourself up without regret. In exchange, gain the ocean. Listen, O drop, bestow upon yourself this honor, and in the arms of the sea be secure. Who indeed should be so fortunate, an ocean wooing a drop? In God's name, sell and buy at once, give a drop, and take the sea full of pearls." We are a drop of water in the great ocean of life. We rise together as a wave, and eventually we will fall back and merge as the ocean waters again. So this is what our water communion is all about. It's about remembering, and it's about renewing our connection to the whole. Now, Jim and I did finish our goddess water garden, by the way. It took about a week, but it takes the time it takes. And during that week, we came to really appreciate her and the space that we had around her. And we love hearing that water flowing as it reminds us every day of the sacredness of water and the gift that water is in our lives. My cat especially loves to just sit beside it during the days. So let us join together now as a community. We're going to let these waters renew us as a community. So blessed be. We're going to enter into our water communion now. And this year I want to introduce our ritual altar. So this ritual altar we're going to use throughout the year. We're going to actually use it at different times to acknowledge different moments on the calendar, different holidays, different commemorative dates that we want to acknowledge. And so today we're acknowledging our water communion with our water bowl. And this bowl has been in the community, I hear, for quite a while, so many of you will recognize it. And today I have some special water. So as we get our water communion started, I'm going to begin with this water. And the water I'm going to begin with is actually from our water communion last year. So last year, as many came together, they poured water from many different places. And also a lot of that water came from our very own Little Noonday Creek, which is here in our property. Question for you as I start to pour this water. Those of you that were here last year, I'm wondering, can you tell which drop of water was yours? Can you, Jeffrey, you were here. Can you find the water that was yours? Yes, I see mine right now. You see yours in there? You don't think you've merged into the whole? It may have. Oh, okay, it may have by now. Well, I think it has. So please, let us join together in our water communion.
This water is sacred. It is made sacred by the many hands that have poured it with intention and love, the many stories that each drop contains, and the many lives surrounding it in its unique moment, connected by commitment and faith. This water is sacred. May it continue to flow through the community with shining reflections of the unique gifts that flow through each of its members. This water is sacred. May it continue to nurture this community with sustaining hope that we journey together through ripples of growth and change. This water is sacred. May it continue to bless this community with loving reminders of our collective responsibility to one another and to the world. This water is sacred. May its ripples be a reminder that the changes and growth within this community bring movement and transformation to the world beyond our doors. This water is sacred. May its purity offer grace to our community and the willingness to forgive ourselves and one another when we make mistakes. This water is sacred. In moments when we are confused or uncertain, may it bring us clarity of purpose and commitment. This water is sacred. In moments when the reservoirs of our hearts and spirits are drained by sorrow or pain, may it nourish them with the knowledge that we are surrounded by a deep and abundant love. This water is sacred.
Thank you, Bruce King, for putting together, and thank you all for participating in our water communion. This water is sacred. Each of you listening this morning is part of this communal bowl. Each of you are welcome here with your unique expression to join us, to join this community, to let these waters here renew you, to let them bring you peace, strength, and to allow them to hold you. Let them remind you that you are never, ever alone. I'd like to invite you now. Oh, one more thing I just have to add.